Hello guys, this is Tulio. This is the second part of the COVID series. In the first one, I covered the tech sector, and now the idea is to cover consumer goods. The format of this is basically I'm going to give an introductory part on giving some information on the industry, and then I'm going to give a word to the specialist. Um, I have now with me Madison Gu. She has a background in management consulting. She also worked for a nonprofit covering health and infectious diseases like Ebola and HIV. Recently, she did summer internship in Amazon, but she's not covering platforms and also retail. But she's not here just because of that, but also because she's a compulsory shopper. Isn't that right, Madison?
Yes, yeah, I'm a self-professed shopaholic.
Okay, thanks for being here with me. So I'm going to remove Madison for a moment to give the basic information on the industry. Basically, starting looking at it, we can see that the sector has been growing pretty well. It's actually 5% per year, which is above the GDP worldwide growth economy, which is about 3.5%. Another way to look at this is if we break between offline and online. And what we can see is that a good part of this growth is actually being pushed by the online, which has been growing 22% comparing to just 3% of the offline. And the fact of this is that the online over the total sales has been increasing in the share. So in 2019, it was about 12%, and it's expected, especially after this crisis, this movement's gonna continue. When we look at the top 10 players of the market, so 9 out of 10, as expected, were actually, they sell more offline than online. The only exception is actually Amazon, which is the third position here. And even Walmart, that they have a very strong position in the online market. Nowadays, this just represents 3% of their total sales. Another way to look at this is if we look at the price of the stocks of important players, different from the tech sector, they're actually being flat, if not a little bit better in the case of Costco. So this shows that this, in a sense, they might be a benefit or at least not very affected by this crisis. But I also believe it was important to bring some of the top companies that hire MBAs. And when we look at this, the situation is a little bit different. So they actually have been very close to the market, reducing 10 or 13%. Or in the case of Nike, actually, they were pretty much affected, reducing 31% of their value since the crisis started. So another way to look at this is if we look at the consumer behavior. This is when we look at different product categories, we can see that lines as luxury and cosmetics, they have decreased a lot. This is expected as people are not going out that much. They don't care to look well the whole time. And if we look at products like home hygiene, and this is probably we're talking about toilet paper, as they were assaulted in the supermarkets, they actually increased like 150%. So this is how people behave during the crisis. And I believe it was also important to understand how they behave after the crisis. So this is might be a good reference if we look at the SARS crisis in 2002 and 2003, and we can see that different product categories, they have different behaviors. So for example, when we look at medicine and home hygiene, they have a peak during the crisis because people buy a lot. They believe they're going to need it. In the end, they realize they don't. So it actually reduced the sales after that. When we look at food, it doesn't change much during the crisis, and after it recovers pretty well. And when we look at the third one, which would be, for example, beverages, they reduce a lot during the crisis, but they actually recover pretty well. So we might expect something like this during a crisis. Of course, this is a little bit different. Just a quick look on the trends. The first of them would be the rise of the digital consumer, which is already mentioned, the globalized supply chains, which is all over the media every time. Also, we saw an increase in conscious consumption trend in the consumer. Another one is that as population grow older, products related to health and wellness, they're getting more common. And in the end, new services and type of brands like the private label and subscription services, they're getting more and more important. I highlight the ones that probably are going to be more impacted by this crisis. So now I bring Madison back again. Madison, so the first question here would be to understand how do you believe that the consumer goods industry will respond to this crisis?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that this is a situation that's in the modern times pretty unprecedented. Like we've seen kind of recessions before based on economic reasons, but this is really like a health crisis that's causing an economic crisis. And so I think that this is the hard part. It's there's not a lot of things that we can control as a consumer goods industry. So a lot of it has to do with what's best for public health policy right now. So, it's pretty bad for the economy for everybody to be staying home and all these shops to be closed. But that's what we have accepted that we need to do to control the public health situation. So, as an industry, I think what's hard is there's not that much that they can do to adapt.
Hmm.
So, one thing is if you already have kind of online systems in place where people can order and still get some things delivered, even though the volume might be a little bit lower, then you like an Amazon, for example, can still kind of maintain themselves. I think that the main issue right now for a lot of these companies is going to be cash flow. So right now we know a down period, but it's like how well are you going to manage your finances to be able to survive this and then come out of it,
Yeah,
because I think that there are a lot of opportunities coming out of the crisis. So it could lead to a less saturated market, right? Because those who are not financially viable may exit the market, maybe some startups, maybe some ones who are, cash light, and that'll create opportunities for those who were able to manage their cash better.
yeah,
So I would really focus on more of the internal things, like how can you keep your workers, and like downsize a little bit and cut costs without kind of laying all these people off, and kind of prepare yourself, and how do you manage your cash effectively during this time.
yeah. And which of the trends that I mentioned before do you believe they're going to be more impacted by this crisis?
Yeah, so you were talking about kind of, we talked a little bit about the digital consumer, so
Mhm.
versus offline sales. So I think that's really important, but those are things that you need to have in place already, or you need to figure out how to communicate that to your consumers, like for them to know that you're still working, maybe not at full steam, but you can still deliver some of those essential products that they want. um, I mean, obviously, the older population part is really important as well. We're kind of recognizing the importance of health and wellness. So I think in the boom years, we're very focused on like kind of wants and like things that are not necessities, but like
Mhm.
because we as an economy were doing so well, people could really splurge on like luxury items and non-essentials. And now we're kind of back to the basics, right? Because we realize how important our health is and how important those necessities are. And so I
Mhm.
think for the next like short-term period, that'll kind of be the focus, so those companies are positioned better.
Yeah.
um,
Uh,
and I think that the globalized supply chain, I think that's an important trend as well. I think it's actually a downside in this case because our
mhm.
supply chains are so globalized and we're so focused on competitive advantage. There's a lot less local manufacturing. And that puts companies at risk of, exposure to outside forces, right? So like when China kind of shut down, when they were trying to control the virus, so many supply lines were stopped basically for a lot of
Mhm.
big international companies. So maybe this is a time that companies are going to reevaluate their supply chains and try and have more diversified and like more of a mix so that they're not exposed to just Chinese manufacturing
Yeah.
or external.
I believe you already touched upon a little bit of the challenges, so I would like to move for the next question, which is looking at how a consumer goods company works. Which of the departments do you believe they're going to be more positively and negatively impacted by this?
So that's a hard part. And I think this relates to kind of your last question is like, where should MBAs focus? Like,
Yeah.
I think that there are going to be departments that are like essential, like, finance, like, the internal kind of operations that are not so like outward facing, and they're still going to need to continue to operate. Maybe they're going to have to like make themselves a little bit leaner or like figure out ways to like manage
Yeah.
during this crisis period. But I mean, there's no denying that we still need those functions, right? I think the hard part is like, okay, so maybe some of the outward consumer facing or like client facing aspects are going to have to downsize. So like I don't know, like in my head, like maybe like marketing type functions, like that might be a little bit hard because like who are you marketing to right now?
Hmm.
Because like people are at home, but maybe that creates some opportunities with like more innovative types of like online marketing and social media marketing. And how do you actually engage consumers in this like very saturated market to build like real connections with
Yeah.
them, as opposed to just trying to use this as an opportunity? Because I think we've seen a lot of backlash, like when people try and capitalize on a situation like this, like
Hmm.
brands get really punished because they seem like they're being inauthentic. So like keeping those connections authentic with consumers, but like at the same time, like being really aware of like more sensitive to the situation and what's important right now.
Yeah, and now not thinking much as analysts or as a worker, how do you believe that we as consumers, we should behave differently during this crisis in order to sustain a good economic environment for these companies?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because I think that like I try to be pretty conscious about consumerism, and like I worry about like, you know, I don't consume at the same levels because I don't want to have to put a delivery person at risk, you know,
Hmm.
of delivering products,
Yeah.
and they have to like move around and interact with people. I think that's a risk, but at the same time, on the flip side, I also worry about people who work hourly wages and are not lucky enough to be able to work from home. Those people might really suffer. So I still want those people to have jobs. So it's kind of that balance of like, I want to make sure that the things I'm ordering are not putting too much of the strain on like workers and systems. I remember like one of my friends had posted a comment about how like home delivery of groceries, like they only have so many slots. And like me as an able-bodied person, and with some exceptions in Spain, I can still go out and get groceries if I really need them. But like somebody who's, you know, has challenges with movement might need those slots. So it's kind of about making those choices, right? I want to support the economy and I want to still, you know, buy the things I need. But I also don't want to put people at risk, and I don't want to take up in the system need.
Correct. Yeah, it's a situation that is new to all of us, and definitely we're gonna need to learn how to live in this, especially because this probably will take a little bit more time than we expected at first. So, Madison, thanks a lot for your specialist answers here in my questions. I hope you and everyone who's watching this, you're safe and your family is safe. And thanks for watching. Bye bye,
Thanks so
guys.
much, Julio. Bye.
Thank you.